What is nature? How does that word natural bridge the gap between science and religion?
Natural is total bullshit.
To them, it was about more prescription medicine.
Selling supplements is a multi-billion-dollar industry that's closely tied with big pharma.
These guys are making money off selling bunk, and they have government approval for it.
What do people want when they eat natural? In a sense, they want to avoid the most natural thing of all, which is death.
We all want to stay young forever.
There's an entire industry that is talked into being dissatisfied with ourselves.
But we live in a world full of noise.
Celebrity diets and detox.
Of science versus pop culture. I'm here to change that.
To understand nature is to really understand ourselves. Nature is the greatest intelligence on the planet. It's more intelligent than your Apple computer. It's more intelligent than your IBM. And inside of nature's code is all that we need in order to adapt and survive on this planet. Until we understand how to connect to nature, read nature, and get the information from nature, we are going to be a lost civilization.
What is with our obsession with natural, with clean, and with pure? Health products everywhere seem to be focused on those things, on organic, on only being natural.
At the heart of it is that nature is somehow beneficial, and anything that smacks of chemical intervention is dangerous.
There's this Garden of Eden myth where everything was natural and everything was perfect, and then we interfered, we went in and we did something wrong. We sinned. And natural, I think, has always been and is still now a way of getting back to that perfect place. And it comes with a set of rules, right? About how not to sin, how to act naturally rather than unnaturally, which is what got us kicked out of the garden to begin with, organic garden.
Over the years, this is probably the biggest myth I've had to fight, that natural means benign and safe, synthetic is dangerous.
The wave we're seeing now is that there's a ton of people out there who just distrust everything. They want to go back to nature, they started to question everything. And this idea of natural is being used to sell a lot of stuff.
What they're looking for isn't a coherent and logical system for organizing reality. What they're looking for is something more like a religion in which nature, with a capital N, is good. And they are doing the right thing by avoiding a list of forbidden, unnatural products or actions.
But what is natural? What does that mean? It's an extremely elusive term, and I think that's part of the appeal.
It's what drives, the organic food industry. It's what drives, the supplement industry. This notion that somehow natural is better.
The word natural has been appealing simply as kind of an almost religious term for what's good. Classical Chinese philosophy, you had ziran, which means self-so of itself, which is literally a synonym for organic. In Greece, you have phusis, this idea that what you wanted was to allow things to be their own nature, in Latin, natura. In a very basic way, for a long time, human interference is what creates artifice or artificiality. Humans make artifacts, but nature makes natural things. The less human interference there is, the more natural it is.
Natural is total bullshit. It's a complete marketing ploy. When you look at the ingredients on the label of a natural product, they aren't much different than the actual product.
You have products all over that are focused on natural. You have natural deodorant. You have natural cat food. You have natural shampoo. You have natural jeans.
Does it mean anything anymore? Like now you have sodas with natural cane sugar in it. That's
well,
better?
did you see the organic Gatorade?
No.
How classic is that?
It gets even worse, you guys. You've got organic vodka, which you can drink with your all-natural cigarettes. I mean, this sounds like the start of an organic Saturday night.
We've always projected the kinds of things that we think are dirty or unclean onto this natural-unnatural distinction. Unnatural actions, now people are like, oh yeah, Monsanto's actions in the world. Talk about it 150 years ago and it was pleasuring yourself, Take it back 150 years before that, it was interacting with the wrong caste. It's more just a placeholder for the kinds of basic ideas of right and wrong that I think a society has. Starting in the 17 and 1800s, people wanted to figure out how to eat naturally, that is to say, for our nature. So early on, the debate about whether you should be vegetarian was about whether or not it was natural to eat meat or not. And that kind of debate about what we do naturally in an almost biological sense took off in the 17 and 1800s. You had that Victorian idea of natural that didn't want you to eat unnatural foods, in part because it would lead to unnatural acts. But you see these same kinds of ideas that can be traced in the 17 and 1800s when people first started trying to make sense of science and how it related to health and medicine.
Natural may be difficult to define, but the trends associated with it, a focus on organic and alternative and holistic approaches to health, are having a clear impact on our world.
And over the last 5-10 years, it's become seemingly more popular. There's natural everything. What's going on? What's driving that?
There is a split between the kinds of technology that people are welcoming into their lives in terms of medicine, in terms of food technology, and it's alien to them. It is much harder to understand than it was 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago. And the harder something is to understand, the more unnatural it seems.
So there's this notion that conventional medicine is bad for you, big pharma is out to get you, it's all about chemicals you're putting in your body, you gotta get on this thing because it's natural, it's supposed to help you without any of the side effects. You know, it'll do all kinds of stuff for you.
So there's something very appealing to a vision of a world, a natural world, in which you actually understand how things are made, in which you understand what it is that you are putting into your body. Because in a sense, then it's like you. You're not putting something in that's foreign to you, that's unnatural to you, and chemicals are foreign to people. Processing of food is foreign to people in a way that natural remedies isn't foreign to people.
So the natural approach takes you to a place where you eat real food and you get the basic things that you've always needed, like sleep, water, exercise, de-stress. Your body can heal. That's the natural approach. Your body wants to heal, and it knows how to heal.
And you really feel that this approach has been the answer?
Absolutely. I have never felt better in my entire life.
You know, I think our generation is definitely more into this kind of stuff. It's becoming more of a lifestyle than a movement. People are taking the way that they feel into their own hands. Everybody wants to feel good, and I think that this has become a new addiction for people. And I think people are just more conscious.
The belief seems to be that by pushing aside elements of our modern world and adopting a more natural lifestyle, we may be able to, perhaps just a bit, cheat death. But is there any science to support this idea? Is natural actually better for us?
Nature is not benign. Bacteria, viruses, fungi, hurricanes, lightning, these are all natural. We spend much of our life trying to overcome the ravages of nature, very often by using synthetic substances.
Natural and eating natural and taking natural medicines, in certain ways, it's well and good, right? But when they take the next step, and they think to themselves, for example, well, vaccination is unnatural, then it gets dangerous.
It's the naturalistic fallacy. There is nothing magical about natural. Arsenic is natural. Tar sand is natural, right? And no one wants to ingest that stuff. But I think this idea of natural speaks to people's anxiety about things like toxins and chemicals and the role of industry in our food.
How did we get here? What's causing this rejection of modern medicine and food technologies, this distrust of science, and this yearning to return to all things natural? And what effect will it have on our future?
Hippocrates, who's the grandfather of all medicine, coined the phrase, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food."
Of course, Hippocrates lived in 400 BC, and medical knowledge was still based around the four humors. But the idea of food as medicine prevails.
A huge component of this embrace of natural is organic food.
What draws you to eating natural, eating organic?
Probably all the food documentaries I've seen on sugar, on the livestock industry, on the impacts both in your body and environmentally.
I'm a fan of certified organic, and for a reason, because it's better for our planet, it's better for our bodies.
So why do you eat organic? What's the motivation?
Just like no pesticides, no chemicals, no GMO, and like you can see it in the food, you know, and how it makes you feel afterwards. You feel much cleaner, and you know, your skin looks better, and you know, it reflects in your energy and the way you look.
I'm a big believer in organic. I love farmers markets. That's a beautiful thing. When things are grown and brought in and you get the food from homegrown markets that are local, I think that's the best.
In the U.S., organic products are now available in nearly 20,000 natural food stores and in 3 out of 4 conventional grocery stores.
Everyone's more health conscious these days. They're just more exposed to what's happening in their food systems, and so they just want to be a little bit more environmentally friendly and then also just conscious of their own health. In organic farming, we don't use any chemicals or herbicides or pesticides or chemical fertilizers to grow our crops, so we're chemical free. And I think a lot of people think that that's organic farming right there and it stops, but it's not. It's actually bigger than that. It's a philosophy. One of the biggest things organic farming is treating the soil really well and nourishing the soil, and therefore we're going to have healthier crops, more nutrients in those crops. There you go. Oh, yeah. We're physically out there all the time. It is relatively cheaper to get an input that's chemical and then watch your produce get really big. So yeah, it takes a lot longer and it's a lot harder. I also think you get a better product. You can see the difference, and I definitely think you can taste the difference. Our carrots are sweeter, they just are.
Although there is a common perception that organic food is better for you than conventionally grown food, numerous studies have shown that there is little difference in nutritional value.
The nutritional quality is not determined by whether you grow it organically or not. It's determined by the kind of seed that you use. It's determined by the amount of sunshine, by the amount of rainfall, by how the soil has been cultivated. I mean, there are many, many different factors.
A USDA report notes that there continues to be double-digit growth in the demand for organic products. And as the demand grows, the supply must as well.
There needs to be a change in a larger food system and policy. There's a lot more larger farms growing organically. However, it's more of a conventional way of farming, but just using organic inputs instead of like replacing things and not using the philosophy. So something somewhere beyond us has to shift.
Not all organic farms are driven by the same philosophies, but they're all selling the same idea, the elusive concept of natural.
People want to eat natural food because they think they're going to be healthier. They tell you it's going to help them live longer and live a longer, healthier life. And to be honest with you, there's very little science to back up that idea, almost none, in fact.
Organic actually does have a definition. You can't have used any synthetic fertilizers, you can't have used any synthetic pesticides, and no genetic modified organisms are allowed in the production. That makes people believe that there are no pesticides that are used in organic agriculture, which is not true. There are dozens of pesticides that are allowed as long as they come from a natural source. So to give you an example, copper sulfate, which occurs in nature because it can be mined, is allowed in organic agriculture. And it has a worse profile than many synthetic pesticides, but it's natural.
In fact, this misunderstanding about pesticides has been shown to reduce fruit and vegetable consumption in low-income shoppers. Not a good outcome.
I really see the appeal of eating something that is in the state that it should be in, was just allowed to follow its own spontaneous mechanism. But again, there's no actual definition to that. The organic foods that people are eating were designed by human beings over many hundreds of years of breeding. And so it's really just another way of allowing people to feel like they're doing the right thing.
Buying food is a form of self-expression. You are kind of telling the world that this is the kind of person I am. I'm the kind of person that eats organic food. It becomes part of your identity package. I read these kinds of papers, I drive a Prius, I ride my bike everywhere, and I eat organic food.
She became vegan about a year ago, and it seemed like it's shaping her character, shaping who she is, shaping her values.
It was after I became vegan that I started watching the food documentaries, really started learning about what our food was doing and the roles it plays in our body and in the world. And becoming vegan really accentuated who I feel like I am.
One of the reasons that it's so difficult to change people's minds about a topic like organic food or vaccination or the role of the concept of natural and how we live our lives is because they've adopted those concepts as part of their own personal worldview. It's part of who they are. And this is the reason why you can get people that believe the scientific consensus around climate change, but at the same time, they do not believe the scientific consensus around GMOs. That's because one concept fits with their personal brand, the other concept does not. And once it becomes part of your personal brand, once it becomes part of how you identify yourself, it becomes very difficult to change your views on that topic.
Eating a healthy diet is one of the most important choices we make for our bodies, but there's no evidence supporting a distinction between organic and conventional farming in terms of health outcomes. To be fair, this is a complex topic, which also involves things like concern for the environment, farmers, and animal welfare. But the lifestyle associated with eating organic, the personal brand built around holistic nutrition, often seems more powerful than the relevant evidence.
Often there are people that have a particular product they're trying to sell. Often there are people that have, kind of a lifestyle, a philosophy they're trying to sell as opposed to what the science really says. All of that's great if people are attracted to a particular philosophy, but I think we need to be careful not to mix that with what the science says.
The bottom line here is that pretty soon, by 2050, there will be 10 billion people coming to dinner in the world. It's not going to be possible to feed them organically. It is a niche market. And for people who believe that this is good for them and have the money, fine, go buy organic. But the vast majority of the population cannot afford the extra cost, and it is not possible to produce the volume of food that is needed to feed the world without the judicious use of agrochemicals.
The holistic approach to health is characterized by a consideration of the whole person and the environment. It's a shift away from modern medicine, putting a focus on the root causes of disease instead of the symptoms. Holistic health emphasizes the connection between mind, body, and spirit, and how that balance impacts your overall health and wellness.
You are a holistic nutritionist.
Yes.
Tell me what that is.
I basically talk to people and I find out what the root cause of their illness is. I go all the way back to when they were born, almost in utero, what was going on with their parents, what happened their first 7 years of their life, what kind of trauma they might have had, illnesses they had, what kind of life they're living today. I think holistic nutrition is about getting to the root and healing them so they don't have to come back to me.
Seems like this idea of natural and holistic is taking off. What is attracting people to this idea?
Going to the doctors is not making them better. The conventional approach is let's just give you a pill because you have symptoms and they're not feeling better. And then they're getting another drug because that drug has not made them feel good.
I think that overprescribing and going to that first off, then trying to fix what's typically off in your body and what's causing the problem, which is,
or the underlying root of the problem, not just the symptom.
It doesn't treat the root cause, and then it can cause more problems.
And doctors don't have time today to spend time with them and find out why are they sick.
The phrase root causes is one that is often used by those who embrace natural approaches, but it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of science-based healthcare. Of course, science-informed professionals also appreciate the importance of preventative strategies. It also takes for granted that these natural approaches are actually treating the alleged root causes. Between my Twitter feud with the great de-educator Deepak Chopra and my 400-page takedown of celebrity influence, my reputation often precedes me. Still, meeting with Gwyneth's personal spiritual advisor, Shaman Durek, offered a unique glimpse into this world of holistic health.
What about this increasing interest in alternative approaches to health? What do you think is the social phenomenon that is driving that interest?
People have been, since the long term, always associating their power and their ability to receive health and wellness from the medical world. We look back in the Dark Ages and the Renaissance period, whenever someone got sick, they were sent to the doctor and they would bleed them. They would do all of these different therapies. No one questioned it. And what's happening right now is people are tired of putting their power outside of themselves. And so alternative therapies and alternative medicine is giving them a more broader approach to being able to make a decision for themselves.
So you really did have a personal journey that brought this approach into your own life.
I did. I am not a doctor and I'm not a PhD. I just wrote a book. It's called Cancer Hacks because I was diagnosed with cancer at 32 and I healed myself with both the Western and Eastern approach. And mostly I meditated and I did yoga and I started juicing and I became a vegan. I didn't choose to do chemo and a stem cell transplant, which they recommended. And my husband, 11 years later, was diagnosed with cancer. He just did the Western approach and conventional medicine and passed away a year and a half later. I watched how I was handled and what I did for myself and him, and I realized what was the difference because it was huge.
Do you think there's a tension between the holistic community and sort of the science-based community?
There is a lot of tension. I do believe in some of the Western conventional medicine. I think for a short term, some of the drugs are great to get you through a certain period of time. But long term, I think they do a lot of problems with our system. And I think they do a lot of damage because they're not great for us.
While I'm happy this worked out for Alyssa, I can't endorse this holistic nutrition approach to cancer treatment. There's no evidence that links juicing or other holistic diets to the curing of cancer. Anecdotal experiences, no matter how compelling, should not be given the same weight as science-based analysis, especially when discussing serious diseases.
What about using alternative medicine in conjunction for, serious diseases? You're not rejecting science-based medicine, rather you're seeing it as a way to complement science-based medicine. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, let's take cancer, for instance. Cancer is an inflammation that takes place in the body where the cell actually continues to multiply itself and constantly merge in upon itself. So it creates a tumor. We have to understand that these things started somewhere, These symptoms that are taking place has a core. And what we need to do is understand the core. Medicine and doctors cannot be discredited. However, I think when we bring science and we bring alternative therapies, I honestly think we're going to lessen disease on the planet. Our need to say medicine is the only way and alternative therapies and alternative medicine is hoopla, it's hocus pocus. Our pride makes disease stronger.
I don't think that anyone would blame a person who has some serious illness for whom conventional treatment has not worked. They will try anything. That's very understandable. It's okay to try to do this in a complementary way, not instead of. Unfortunately, I've also come across people who were diagnosed with cancer and who were convinced by the activists that conventional treatment will scar them, burn them, or poison them. Those are the key words for surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation from their view, when conventional routes that have a chance of working are replaced by hearsay and by emotion. I think this is where the danger lies.
I get a lot of hate mail. I actually get a lot of people who send me angry notes. And the number one thing I hear, the absolute number one thing I hear is trust. I can't trust you because the science is bad. Are you thinking, you know what, I can't trust those studies because of industry being involved?
I think there's many false studies.
You can have all kinds of studies, but who makes the study? If the study comes from the companies, then, there's a trust issue there because they tell us one thing, they do something else. We really can't trust that.
So are you more suspicious whenever, that's part of the story? Pesticides, pharmaceuticals, is that something that at least raises your alarm bells?
Even as a nurse, I would be really hard-pressed to take antibiotics. I think the overprescription of all of the pharmaceutical industry and doctors feeding you antibiotics when it's not really necessary is really prevalent in our society.
There's so much information on the internet about all these different modalities like vaccines and drugs, and people are looking up what they do to you. They're starting to question the doctors and wondering, why should I take this? Is there another alternative?
I hear this so often, Alan. I can't trust big pharma, I can't trust big food, and therefore I'm going to turn to natural, even though that's become a big industry too.
I think there is a fear with unnatural products, whether it's medicines or foods, that there's a fundamental kind of deception going on because people have been burned in the past.
I have endured and tolerated the existing healthcare system for a long time. I'm 58 years old. My first neurosurgery was 1992.
Bev tells us that she's had 5 surgeries over the course of 20 years. This is the result of a workplace injury and the need for a spinal implant.
In 1993, that type of neurosurgery was actually in its infancy. My body started feeling like I was poisoned, like I was sick. I was in internal medicine at the hospital. I had neurosurgeons and doctors who continually put me on medicine that doesn't work. Then I have to wean off the medicine. There was times I couldn't walk or use my arms. Times the pain was so bad I would pass out. And the years went on and I started getting so sick. I tried getting the doctors to help me. Then when they realized none of the medicine had worked on me, they just said there was nothing more that they could do. Well, I wasn't satisfied with that, and I needed to find health care to heal.
Bev says she found relief through a naturopathic road to health.
There was no healing involved in any of that I did in Western medicine. The doctors don't really want to help me heal. To them, it was about more prescription medicine.
Listening to these stories, it's easy to see why patients can attribute their relief to the natural methods they've been using. And while I don't want to disregard these perspectives, it's important not to suggest there's evidence of a clear cause and effect, especially when our health is involved.
There's this notion that there's a few people out there who are pulling the strings and who don't want you to get this stuff because the longer you wait, the more money they make.
Big Pharma, a shorthand for an abstract entity of corporations, regulators, politicians, physicians colluding together to control the trillion-dollar pharmaceutical industry.
The deep distrust of Big Pharma and somehow it's polluting the evidence.
Right. Well, this is, conspiracy theory that Big Pharma is only interested in profits and doesn't care how many bodies it leaves in the street.
But it wasn't always this way. The pharmaceutical industry got its start in the early 19th century. The American company Pfizer, for example, was founded in 1849. During the Civil War, the great need for painkillers, preservatives, and disinfectants allowed the business to expand. New drug discoveries, including insulin and penicillin in the 1920s, were celebrated by the public as significant, life-saving breakthroughs. As science progressed, pharmaceuticals were not only saving lives, but revolutionizing them. The 1960s introduced the contraceptive pill, a development that had significant cultural impact. But currently, the pharmaceutical industry has one of the worst reputations. When asked, the public consistently ranks this industry near the bottom.
So what's happening? How did we get here?
Scandals, twisted science, the growing cost of pharmaceuticals, and reports of drug reps buying influence with doctors have caused serious and understandable trust issues for many in the public. Rightly or not, the industry is often perceived as merely profiting from human desperation.
There really are large pharmaceutical companies whose interests often aren't aligned with the public, and Big Tobacco really did try to deceive people. And so a way of making sure that you aren't deceived is eliminating all of the things in your life that you don't understand, that come from places that are larger than you.
The distrust of conventional medicine seems to be one of the central reasons for the interest in alternative therapies. But the alternative is shaping up to be a booming business on its own.
It's interesting how people always seem to forget that alternative medicine's about profit too. Selling supplements is a multi-billion-dollar industry that's closely tied with big pharma.
It's absolutely a huge industry. They use the same tricks that they accuse big pharma of doing in their marketing, but somehow it's legitimate. This whole business of alternative medicine is sort of like a quagmire, because what is alternative medicine? What is it an alternative to? Alternative to proven conventional methods?
I think people completely overlook the conflicts that are present with naturopaths, with homeopaths, and with the vitamin industry.
I think the conflict is actually worse. Because even if you blame Big Pharma, there's some solid research. There's a process for regulating it. There's clinical trials. For these other guys, there's none of that stuff. They don't need to do that, right? And there's this industry where nobody's actually looking at what they're doing. They're not being scrutinized. They're basically just making this stuff and marketing it and selling it, and there's no checks.
They also try to put on a little bit of scientific legitimacy to make it seem more real.
It's important, especially with the word natural, to fold that science back in. So we associate natural with biology. For example, biology is a way of describing the natural world, and that's why you see bio in all kinds of natural products. You've got prebiotics, you've got probiotics, and of course they're all being used to put the bi back into biology, because they're selling products that ultimately aren't doing what they claim. Instead, what they're doing is giving us a sense that we have successfully combined what is good and what is scientific.
The industry of supplements and herbal products is just as big an industry as the pharmaceutical industry, but it's not looked at as like that. People think that this is some kind of benign business that is only interested in the public's welfare without any interest in making money, which of course is not the case.
These guys are making money off selling bunk to the public.
Under the label of natural.
Yes, and they have government approval for it.
And in my many, many years of dealing in this business, I can tell you that I have met a lot more unethical people in the alternative health market than in the conventional health market.
Of course, this embrace of natural can have even more detrimental effects. It can make people believe that there are toxins and that there are dangers associated with things that are truly, truly beneficial. And of course, there I'm talking about vaccination. You don't want to comment on the controversial topic of vaccinations, do you? Can I force you to do that?
Your immune system can get compromised very early on. No one's focusing at an early age of how do we make the immune system strong as we get older.
There are so many issues associated with the anti-vaccination movement. It's not a topic we can comprehensively address here. However, I do want to highlight its connection to the growing obsession with all things natural. Edward Jenner performed the world's first vaccination for smallpox in 1796. Louis Pasteur introduced a vaccine for rabies in 1885. After that, as scientific knowledge expanded, vaccines emerged for cholera, diphtheria, typhoid, tetanus, and many more diseases, including the vaccine for polio in 1953. Considered one of the greatest achievements of modern civilization, vaccinations still save millions and millions of lives every year. But despite these successes, and strong evidence of efficacy and safety, the sway of the anti-vaxxers seems to be increasing.
I grew up in Nigeria. I did not know any anti-vaxxer growing up in Nigeria. That's for sure. Because they know disease. Polio is real. Chickenpox is real. Measles is real. They've seen that stuff. They've seen it kill children. They've seen it harm people.
They're not worried about natural, organic.
Right. Before the vaccines came, right, they tried the natural, and their children died.
I think this is a really important point. People don't have that experience of disease. We're talking about things on the margins now. Right. So in general, the population is healthy.
Right.
And so they're looking for things to worry about.
Right.
And
when we had measles in Alberta, there was a long lineup of people who wanted to get the vaccine. You couldn't convince those people to get the vaccine if there was no measles. The absence of disease makes people feel like they have choice.
Here is Jenny McCarthy. She's on CNN, and she's talking about her belief that vaccines cause autism. This is where she made some of the most ridiculous comments about the connection between vaccines and autism.
Just because two factors run together doesn't mean that one causes the other. Classic example, there's a very strong association between wearing skirts and breast cancer. But no one in their right mind would think that skirts cause the disease. But the association is very strong because women are more likely to wear skirts and women get more breast cancer. This kind of thing is very often used by all kinds of activists. They will draw a graph and it looks very, very compelling. You can draw the same kind of graph for an increase in autism and increase in sales of organic food. And no one would think that organic foods causes autism. But association is not the same as cause and effect.
And what's frustrating about this is it serves as a fantastic example of what's been called false balance. When she was on CNN, it was Jenny McCarthy and a handful of experts, people who have probably spent their entire life studying and talking about vaccines. And here she is having this debate. Who do we remember from that occasion? We remember Jenny McCarthy.
McCarthy's misguided belief got traction in 1998 with the publication of a bogus study, which has since been discredited and retracted, and the lead author, Andrew Wakefield, found to be a fraud. But Jenny McCarthy's twisted tale made the rounds not just on CNN, but on Oprah, The View, and in People magazine, giving her inaccurate perspective a huge audience and branding her as an expert on the topic.
What do you see as the influence of pop culture and celebrities in this sphere?
People have become complacent and putting celebrities as the golden voice when a lot of celebrities don't have a golden voice.
Here's Katy Perry. She's holding up her bag of vitamins. She allegedly takes 26 supplements every day, which is extraordinary. So why do we care what people like Katy Perry are talking about? Well, how many followers does Katy Perry have? She has almost 100 million followers. People feel like they're in a parasocial relationship with these celebrities, and when they tweet about food and when they tweet about vitamins, that can have an impact.
Why do you think these kinds of therapies are emerging?
They were extreme before, and now they're becoming more mainstream.
What do you think is happening in society that has facilitated that?
I think it starts with Hollywood and what those trendsetters are doing.
It's their job to look good.
And with the rise of Instagram, like just kind of spreads like that without any kind of traditional marketing. It's all word of mouth, social media.
So pop culture has become blindsided. What we have to do as a society, because we're living in the age of narcissism, of like on Facebook, use narcissism in a way that actually develops inner personal understanding of ourselves. Why are we liking that picture? Why are we listening to this celebrity? Do we value their beliefs, the way that they live their lives? Is it conductive to the way that we want to live our lives?
To give you a little bit of a comparison, Katy Perry has almost 100 million followers.
The World Health Organization has only 3.6 million.
So that's what we're up against when we're trying to spread scientifically accurate information.
The internet, of course, is an angel and devil at the same time. Wonderful if you know how to search for information. But very often when you Google some disease, the sites that come up first are the quack sites because they really work at coming up first. If you don't have a proper filter, a mental filter, you can easily buy into those.
Social media can serve as a kind of echo chamber, an opportunity to build communities of like-minded individuals. That can be very good in a sense because you do build communities, but at the same time, it builds what's been called a social bubble, a confirmation bubble, and it becomes very, very difficult to change those people's minds because they use social media as a confirmation bias machine. They find people who agree with them, they follow them, and that becomes their only conversation on whatever issue you're talking about.
The natural way, an approach to life that's pure, authentic, and true, an existence free of the artifice of the science and technology that has led us astray.
A powerful myth that underlies all this is the Frankenstein idea, which is that humans are fine the way they are, and the world is fine the way it is, and then we get these pointy-head scientists who come in with no regard for God's plan or nature with a capital N's plan, and they mess with stuff. Dr. Frankenstein creates this monster, and then the monster comes and kills everyone, and that monster is really chemicals, or it's really technology, or it's processed foods, or whatever it is. And I think that that story really has a lot of traction, and natural is a way of avoiding that monster.
So we have this idea of natural, this concept of clean and pure and organic that pervades our society. I think it's fueled by a collection of beliefs that aren't necessarily conceptually consistent, and some concerns, and some of those concerns I think are legitimate, like the issue of trust.
It seems this inclination towards all things natural is gaining momentum for a number of reasons, including suspicion regarding the incentives behind modern medicine and agriculture. While we need to consider the foundations of this distrust, it often appears to be based on intuition and anecdote more than on solid evidence. Still, it is gaining popularity, and with this popularity it is, paradoxically, also becoming increasingly commercialized and industrialized. Natural is big business. The natural fallacy is the belief that something is good solely by virtue of being natural.
Surely it's unnatural to try to cure yourself of a disease. So there's a tension between wanting to make sure that you suffer less than you otherwise would. We build houses. We do all kinds of things to our environment to make ourselves more comfortable, because it turns out natural sucks in a lot of ways. But then we also feel like those things must be responsible for our suffering. So we try to reduce the unnatural aspects of our lives in other areas that we can, like with food, for example, or with medicine. But it doesn't actually make sense if you push it really hard. It's more of a ritual to reassure yourself that you're doing the right thing than an actual ideal that can be achieved. What do people want when they eat natural or when they engage in natural medicine? Well, in a sense, they want to avoid the most natural thing of all, which is death. So you're running away from something that you can never really get away from. And it's something that people have been running away from for thousands of years. The idea that it was better back in the day when things were more natural and humans hadn't interfered with them, and that if you embrace that, you can somehow stave off death, was there with the Taoist monks 3,000 years ago. It will be there 2,000 years from now, unless through unnatural means we achieve immortality.
Will the trend towards embracing all things natural help us cheat death? In my opinion, no. The concept of natural remains tremendously amorphous, and, as we've seen, just because something is natural doesn't necessarily mean it's healthier. In addition, concerning ourselves with the concepts of natural and unnatural, at least as they are currently present in popular culture, may invite a less than ideal rejection of science-informed and effective approaches to health and food production.
Everybody's different. The ones that are very science-based are like, well, is there any kind of science behind this? And usually there isn't.
Not to say there are no benefits. Eating real food, avoiding over-processed food, and supporting sustainable farming are all worthwhile goals. But we can't allow ourselves to accept the mistaken premise that natural is inherently good.
All natural doesn't mean much, but understanding what you're putting into your body is much smarter.
People are part of the natural world, and we can choose to act as a beneficial organism, or we can choose to act as a harmful organism.
Living today in a way that ensures a living for the future, for future generations. So if we look
Pretty good philosophy. Who could be against that, right?
You know, the body's trying to communicate to you why you need to take medicine in the first place.
But if I get hit by a bus, I'm going to the hospital.
What they're really doing is soothing the psyche of people, which is not an unattractive proposition, especially in a hospital setting where you know that they're also getting conventional care.
I think there's hope and promise in it, but I think we have to sort through exactly these issues. And I think the most important questions we can ask is about how can people of all income levels eat healthy?
I don't think that we are going to cheat death. Nobody gets out of life alive. But we want to maximize health in the years that we have here. No matter how much talk you hear about the natural solutions to these complex problems, most people are smart enough to know that you go by the evidence. It's people who make those decisions. People can be smart or not so smart.
You have to have the kinds of conversations that we're having right now. What is nature? How does that word natural bridge the gap between science and religion? I think if we start having those conversations and start showing people these connections, especially young people, we can make a lot of progress in removing myths that are ultimately dangerous when it comes to people avoiding medicine or treating their cancer with natural means.
We all want the same things. companionship, health, comfort, happiness. If we're able to combine the positive elements of natural, being in touch with our bodies and ecosystems, with the beneficial aspects of science and technology, we have the best chance of creating an effective and sustainable approach to health. Using our knowledge and our growing understanding of our world, shouldn't that be the natural way?